There is a moment most people know intimately. Someone asks you to do something you do not want to do. Maybe it is a friend inviting you to an event you have no interest in attending. Maybe it is a colleague asking you to take on a project that will consume your weekends. Maybe it is a family member requesting money you cannot really spare. Maybe it is a business partner pitching an idea that you already know is wrong. And in that moment, you can feel the no forming somewhere in your chest. Clear, quiet, completely certain. But what comes out of your mouth is almost never that no. What comes out is a version of yes, or a long and slightly apologetic explanation of why you cannot quite do this particular thing right now, or a series of qualifications that leave the door open even when you know you should close it. Afterward, you think about what you should have said. You replay the conversation. You wonder why the word that was so obvious inside you was so difficult to actually speak. This is not a character flaw. It is how most of us were trained from childhood. Say yes to teachers. Say yes to parents. Say yes to authority. Be helpful. Be agreeable. Be likable. The social rewards for yes are immediate and visible. The costs are deferred and invisible. So the habit builds across a lifetime until saying no feels not just uncomfortable, but almost physically wrong. A violation of something deep and instilled. And then you meet someone who does not have that problem at all. The first thing you notice is that they are not rude about it. They are not cold or dismissive or difficult. They are often warm, engaged, genuinely present in the conversation. And then, when the ask comes, they simply say no. Not with an elaborate story about their schedule, not with a guilt-laden explanation of their competing priorities. Just, that does not work for me. And then the conversation continues as if nothing remarkable has happened, because for them, nothing has. The no was not an event. It was just an answer. Greg McKeown, who spent years studying how the most effective people in the world manage their time and attention, wrote an entire book about this. His central finding was simple but radical. Almost every high-performing person he studied had developed what he called an effortless no. Not a reluctant no. Not a strategic no. An effortless one, delivered without drama, without justification, without any of the social performance that most people feel obligated to provide. What distinguished these people was not that they were less concerned with relationships, or less empathetic, or less aware of the people around them. It was that they had built a completely different internal framework for what a no meant. To most people, no is a rejection of a person. To the effortlessly wealthy, no is simply an answer about fit. It means, this does not belong in my life right now. It carries no judgment about the person who asked. It is, in its own way, a form of respect, the honesty of a clear answer rather than a performance designed to protect everyone's feelings at the expense of anyone's time. Here is what the explanation costs you. And this is the part that almost nobody talks about. When you say no with an explanation, you are inviting negotiation. You are handing the other person a map of all the conditions under which your no might become a yes. If your reason is that you are busy this week, they will ask about next week. If your reason is that you cannot afford it right now, they will offer a payment plan. If your reason is that you are not sure it is the right fit, they will address each of your concerns one by one until the objections are gone. And the no has quietly become a yes you never intended to give. The explanation transforms a boundary into a problem to be solved. And most people are remarkably good at solving problems when they want something from you. The wealthy understand this intuitively. They have seen enough of the world, enough negotiations, enough deals, enough relationships, to know that the moment you explain a no, you have created a negotiation. And they did not want to negotiate. They wanted to decline. This is why the language is so specific. Not, I cannot do this because of X, Y, Z. Just, that does not work for me. Or, I am going to pass on this one. Or simply, no, but thank you. The complete sentence, nothing appended. The period at the end, not a dismissal, but a boundary. Quiet, stable, and not up for discussion. Oprah Winfrey, who built one of the most valuable media franchises in the world almost entirely on the strength of her own judgment, has spoken about this principle with unusual honesty. She described a long period in her life where she said yes to almost everything: events, commitments, requests, appearances, not because she wanted to, but because the guilt of saying no felt worse than the exhaustion of saying yes. The turning point, she said, was understanding that every yes she gave was simultaneously a no to something else. Every yes to an obligation she did not want was a no to her own creative work, her rest, her relationships, the things that actually mattered. The obligation was visible, the cost was invisible, and invisible costs are the ones that accumulate without anyone noticing. Let us be specific about what a lifetime of reluctant yeses actually costs, because this is where the financial dimension becomes impossible to ignore. Think about what a high-performing professional earns per hour of their focused attention. For someone earning $200,000 a year, 1 hour of genuine focus is worth roughly $100. For someone at $500,000, it is closer to $250. For someone who has built a business, an investment portfolio, or a body of work, the number is much higher, because the decisions they make with that hour compound forward across months and years. Now think about how many hours the average person gives away each year to obligations they did not want and commitments they agreed to out of discomfort rather than genuine alignment. Industry research on time management consistently finds that working professionals lose somewhere between 2 and 4 hours per day to activities they themselves describe as low value. Not because they chose those activities freely, but because they said yes when they meant no. Over a year, at 2 hours per day, that is 730 hours. Over a decade, that is more than 7,000 hours. The equivalent of 3.5 years of full working days, given to things the person did not want, did not value, and did not choose. The wealthy do not do this. Not because they are selfish, but because they have done the math. Coco Chanel understood this at a cellular level long before anyone had the language of productivity psychology to describe it. She built an empire and then dismantled parts of it and rebuilt it according to her own vision. And the defining characteristic of nearly every major decision she made was a refusal to compromise in the direction others wanted her to go. She was offered deals she declined. She was presented with partnerships that seemed financially obvious and said no without explanation. She was pressured by investors, advisors, and the general expectations of an industry to make choices that would have made her richer in the short term and less herself in the long term. And she said no. Consistently, without lengthy justification. And the brand she built is one of the most recognizable in the history of commerce. What Chanel had, and what every person who builds something lasting tends to have, was a strong enough internal sense of direction that the opinions of others could not realign it. Most people's internal compass is weak enough that social pressure can move it. A little guilt, a little obligation, a little fear of disappointing someone. And suddenly, the needle shifts. The wealthy have spent years strengthening that compass until it no longer moves under social pressure. Their no is stable because their sense of what they are building is stable. Derek Sivers, the entrepreneur who built and sold a company for $22 million and then gave the proceeds to charity, developed a framework so simple it sounds almost too obvious. He called it hell yes or no. The idea is this: when you are considering a commitment, any commitment, professional or personal, the only honest answers are either an enthusiastic yes or a no. If your response is anything in the middle, if you are weighing pros and cons and feeling mildly obligated and thinking maybe or I guess I should, that is a no. Dress it up however you want. In the world of limited time and compounding returns, a lukewarm yes is a no that is costing you something. The wealthy apply this framework with a precision that most people find striking. They do not attend events they are moderately interested in. They do not take meetings that might be useful. They do not enter partnerships that seem reasonable. They require something closer to certainty before they say yes. And because the bar is that high, the no is not a difficult decision. It is simply the default when certainty is absent. This is the inverse of how most people operate. Most people's default is yes, and no requires justification. For the wealthy, the default is no, and yes requires justification. The burden of proof runs in the opposite direction, and the result over time is a life that is almost entirely composed of things they actually chose, rather than a life assembled from the accumulated residue of obligations they could not find the strength to decline. There is one more dimension to this that is rarely discussed, and it has to do with what saying no communicates about you. Most people fear that no signals unavailability or unfriendliness or arrogance. And in certain contexts, with certain people, it can. But at a subtler level, the ability to decline without explanation communicates something that most people find unexpectedly compelling: that you have standards, that your time has value, that you are not available to everyone for everything at all times. And this, counterintuitively, tends to make people want your yes more, not less. In every domain where status and respect operate, business, social, creative, professional, scarcity creates value. The person who says yes to everything is easy to obtain. The person who says no with quiet consistency becomes someone whose yes actually means something. Their endorsement carries weight because their refusal is real. The wealthy have learned this not from theory, but from experience. They have watched what happens when they protect their time and attention. The deals that come to them tend to be better because the people offering them know that a no is possible and price accordingly. The relationships that form tend to be more genuine because they are not built on obligation or performance. The work they produce tends to be stronger because it came from genuine selection rather than reluctant acceptance. The no, practiced consistently and offered without apology, creates the conditions for a better yes. That is not a paradox. It is simply what happens when scarcity is real. Most people spend their entire lives rehearsing the explanation, planning how they will soften the no, package it kindly, make it acceptable. And in doing so, they never quite say it, because the explanation always opens the door again, and the door stays open, and the thing they did not want somehow finds its way in anyway. The wealthy closed the door a long time ago, not with coldness, not with arrogance, with clarity, with a settled sense of what they are building and what belongs in it, and a quiet, practiced willingness to say so. The no is not the hard part. The hard part is believing that you do not owe anyone a reason for living your own life on your own terms. Once you believe that, once it has moved from something you have heard to something you have actually internalized, the word gets easier, lighter, almost unremarkable. And then one day, someone asks you something you do not want, and the no comes out clean, without apology, without a story attached. And the conversation continues as if nothing remarkable has happened, because it has not. It was just an answer